Hello everybody, welcome to another in-depth airsoft gun review. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the Cybergun / VFC FNX-45 Tactical, which I've promised I would review for quite a long time now. Never got around to it, but here we are. So it comes in a classic kind of cheesy Cybergun cardboard box. I never really like their advertising. They go by all these silly numbers. You can see here 424 feet per second they shout. Of course that's with a .12 gram BB, which you shouldn't be using. Yeah, just normal Cybergun stuff. And as most people would agree, Cybergun's not a very good company, and a lot of people refrain from buying their products, but this is just one of those guns I wanted to try. I had to just kind of put aside who's rebranding it and just try and appreciate it for a good airsoft gun. But yeah, Cybergun are not great. Inside you just get this vacuum formed thing, not particularly attractive or nice. There are much nicer ways of packaging guns, but not a big deal. And some Cybergun stuff, lots of warnings and things. Nice colour images though in the manual, telling you what to do. Of course, this is the tan version, and interestingly, in the pictures, the gun looks quite unfinished. The magazine is just cast metal; it's not polished. Some of the internal bits look a bit unfinished, so that's interesting. I can't remember what was in here. Maybe just the other back strap. Anyway, you don't get a whole lot. You've got your handgun. By the way, this one was bought from Airsoft World quite a long time ago. I must have had this at least a year and a half, maybe even 2 years now. They were quite expensive when they were brand new, but this one was on sale. It was about £150. I remember when these first came out, they were about £200, and people were quite reluctant to pay that much for them. But when I saw this one for a bit less than that, I thought I'd give it a go. And I've still got it, so it's not that bad. So you get your spare back strap, which is a rubbery material. Quite well cast. And the way you actually swap these on here is a bit more involved than on some handguns. I don't know why I'm starting with this, but I might as well show you. You have to poke something into this hole like an Allen key, and then that pushes a bit of plastic out of the way, which feels like it's going to break every time you do it. And that slides off. And you just get the choice of two. So you've got the slightly rounded one, and you've got this flat one. Normally, I quite like a flat back strap on my pistols, but something about this doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't look right either. It feels a bit odd. It feels a bit too flat, and I think that's because the frame is thick. It's a thick double stack polymer frame, so that doesn't feel quite right to me. I generally keep that one on, but at least you have a little bit of choice. Right, so let's start with externals, how it looks and everything. So as you can hopefully see, hopefully my camera's picking it up all right, the finish is actually pretty nice on this. As I said, I've owned this for a couple of years now, so there are going to be a few little marks on it. It's not going to be perfect. But I think for the most part you can see that the quality of manufacture here is actually pretty good. A little bit of wear on the finish here at the front, as you can see, where it's been sort of holstered a few times and whatnot. But the polymer has a nice finish to it. I'd put it a grade above what you'd get on a TM pistol, like their Glocks or whatever. This is a better feeling plastic. I wouldn't call it a reinforced polymer, but it feels more solid. And yeah, it does have a nice finish that doesn't go shiny. There's perhaps a little bit of shininess in some areas, but compared to something like a TM Glock, which I've already mentioned, the polymer on this is actually quite superior. It's pretty nice. As you'd expect for the price tag, these are reasonably expensive pistols. You can see this ultra reflective magazine, making me look very unattractive. I'm going to get that out of the way. Now my only other VFC gun that I can really compare it to is my Glock 42 here, branded as a whole load of different things. My one was one of the Hogwarts ones that comes in the book. So you can check out my review on that if you haven't seen it already. And this also being a VFC product, you've got a similar kind of polymer. Like I said, superior to the ones some other companies use, like even TM's plastic. I think this is better. And it does give a nice flat finish. This Glock I've been shooting a lot and I've owned it for a while now, and again, it doesn't tend to go shiny like some other plastics. So yeah, I do like the materials that VFC use, including decent quality metal on the slides. Now, it is still a cast part, it's not like a machined slide despite the cost of these guns, but the casting is generally pretty good on these. One area that could definitely do with improvement though, which I noticed on here, is the chamber. That isn't actually a crack that you're seeing there, it's just a weird sort of bump in the casting, so I'm not sure what happened there. But other than that, the casting is pretty crisp, and the finish applied to it is pretty good. It's wearing kind of nicely and evenly, it's not scraping off or scratching off, it's just kind of rubbing down, as you'd expect with, you know, a real gun. It looks pretty good. A little bit of wear on the chamber. So overall fit and finish is actually pretty good. Give it a little shake, there is a bit of a rattle to it, but there's quite a lot of mass to the slide. You can see there's a bit of movement between slide and frame here, but it's really not much worse than on anything else. Just a little bit there. So for fit and finish, it impresses, regardless of the price tag. This is still, it's well built. It's one of the pricier gas blowback pistols out there. Of course, being rebranded by Cybergun, you've got authentic trademark, so you've got the FN logo there, FNX-45 Tactical, 45 ACP, same on the chamber. Stainless steel, FN USA, made in USA. Got quite a nice piece here, which is interestingly kind of moulded in. It's got these strange kind of shiny bits on the plastic around it. It's kind of odd how that's happened, almost like something hot has been pressed on it. It's melted a bit. We've got that serial tag there with a little sort of QR code. That's quite nicely done, nicely laser engraved, I assume. FN logos on the grips, on the frame, and some very intense checkering, or not stippling, yeah, grip area. Something that I've actually found on a lot of FN pistols. So I can't remember if I mentioned it in my review of the Marui FN-57, but I actually find some of the grip material, some of the sharp angles a bit too sharp. I don't want to sound too pathetic, but they kind of make my hand sore after I've been playing, you know, shooting with these for a while. So I did the exact same thing on this that I did on my FN, which is just take a little craft knife to it and actually chop off the top of some of these. I found in that area and a little bit on that side. These ones I just rub down a little bit. As when I get a good grip on the gun, they just dig into my hands a bit. Interestingly, I didn't actually find that when I shot one of these in the States, the real steel one. I didn't find it dug into me so much. So maybe the airsoft manufacturers are going a bit over the top with that. Perhaps for people wearing gloves, it would provide, you know, a good grip. But for me, it's a bit too much, so I had to do that. Right, so let's go over some of the external features. As I'm sure you know, this is the tactical model of the FNX, so you've got the raised up sights to clear a suppressor, should you wish to fit one, which I have got one, I'll show you in a minute. They have holes actually drilled into them, so you can change what inserts you've got in here. Now this is something that I actually did myself. They came with these little white bits that you push in, to kind of look like night sights. What I actually did is looked on a fishing website and found some little tritium capsules that they use for fishing as bait, I think. And if you get the little 3mm ones, very short ones, they actually fit in here. So you can put those inside. The front one's a bit trickier because the cavity is smaller, so it kind of sticks out a bit. But ultimately I found that the ones I bought just didn't have the brightness to really do anything, and when I tried to push the front one in a bit further, it cracked and it lost its luminosity, so I probably wouldn't bother with that. I did try and change the sights as well for some aftermarket ones, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute because that was a bit of a disaster. Anyway, sights it comes with are adequate. I wouldn't bother trying to change them, it's a bit of a pain. And they are indeed very high, so they'll clear a suppressor. The other tactical features include this extended and threaded barrel. It comes with a nice steel thread protector. And unlike a lot of airsoft guns, this is a 16mm clockwise thread with a 1mm pitch. Annoyingly, most airsoft companies don't tell you what pitch the thread is on their guns. So for instance, this is a suppressor that I bought for it. It is a G&G suppressor, and it's actually made for the KWA Vector submachine gun, as you can see on here. All I knew was that it was 16mm clockwise, and I hoped that it would fit this. I didn't know the pitch of any of them. But it turned out that they match perfectly. So if you're wondering what will fit on this, this is a very cheap suppressor. It was about £20, a lot cheaper than those the Osprey, those big blocky ones people usually put on these. And yeah, this is an M16 by 1mm thread. So let's just add this on here. This is just a very plain, no markings, aluminium suppressor. And it looks pretty cool. Yeah, pretty cool looking gun. Now this does introduce some issues, as adding a suppressor often does. The cycling is slowed down a bit. It doesn't quite have the snap that it does without, so that's a bit of a shame. And also adds a lot of rattling. You've got a metal slide, you've got a metal chamber. The tolerances aren't particularly tight, a bit of movement in there. So when you've got the extra weight on, it becomes quite rattly. So really this is just a showpiece. When I take pictures of the gun, I often put it on because it does look nice. But for actual practical use, I wouldn't put it on there. So I'll take it off. Okay, let's continue looking around the exterior. There is a not particularly prominent, but also not particularly hidden seam line, but shooting the real gun pretty much has the same seam line, so nothing to really complain about there. If it really bothers you, just go around with a little craft knife and scrape that off. I was talking about the features that make this the tactical model. You've of course got the RMR slot cut in the slide, so you just remove these little hex screws there, and then you've got to put a spacer on, and then you can fit a variety of little miniature optics on it. It's not something I've bothered with. A lot of the cheap airsoft ones, there's a potential that they won't be able to handle the recoil, and I also don't like that, unlike the real one, I believe, I'm not completely sure, I believe on the real one you can remove this and mount the sight directly to it. Here you need a spacer, which adds a bit of thickness, and then you get a bit of a weird co-witness. So I've just never bothered. I'm not a huge fan of particularly tall pistols. I kind of like it when I like some of the custom Glocks when you've got red dots on those, because they're so flat and they still stay quite small, but this has already got quite a high bore axis, so I wouldn't really want to add any more height onto it. Let's have another look at those sights. Pretty good sights, very tall. Let's have a look at the front sight. Yeah, pretty good sight picture there. I should have let you see it with the suppressor on, but they do clear a suppressor, especially a slim one like the one I had a second ago. 30mm, I think that one is in diameter. Other tactical feature is the extended base on the magazine here. I don't actually like the look of this much. I quite like the look of the standard pistol that's just got the flat bit, but this is certainly unique. And if you were thinking that you might be able to slip that off and put a regular small base plate on, maybe from the real pistol, it's not possible because the body of the magazine actually extends into this and it has a round bottom. It's quite strange, the design. But yeah, you can't just remove that. It's literally as a part of it. It's screwed on and it goes right down to here. You can see this has a very shiny finish. It doesn't quite show up right on the camera, but it's actually what you'd probably call like a black chrome. It's kind of a dark shininess. It can look good in some lights, but my one, which I've had for a couple of years now, has started to get these kind of marks on it which aren't coming off. It's almost the same kind of problems you get when you get stainless finishes or chrome finishes on like Tanaka revolvers and things. They can start to almost look like they've got a bit of pitting. And I'd probably rather just have a black one of these, but it's realistic, I suppose. It's got a nice fake weld mark down the back. It shows up to 15 rounds capacity. And like most VFC pistols, or if not all of them, you've actually got your fill valve up here by the strike sort of valve. So if I just grab some gas here, now I would recommend, because it's a big gun with a metal slide, I'd use something more powerful than the old Pro Gas, but this is all I've got to hand at the moment. And it's a nice silent fill valve, massive gas capacity, lots of BBs as well. I think it's probably 28 rounds or something like that. It's a big magazine. I only have the one. They're quite expensive to buy spares for. And it inserts pretty positively. And also comes out pretty well. Though it doesn't seem to want to drop completely free. Oh, that's actually because it looks like I've put a little bit of tape in here just so it fits a bit tighter. Perhaps add a little bit of rattling beforehand. Right, what else have we got externally? So metal slide, like I said, without a suppressor on, it actually cycles remarkably quickly. Got a good recoil spring in it, which I'll talk about when I talk about shooting impressions. It's actually a really good snappy gun to shoot. Takedown here, I'll show you that in a second. One feature of the FNX, which is pretty impressive, is the ambidextrous controls. So the magazine release is ambidextrous, both sides, no swapping over or anything like that. It works just exactly the same from either side, pretty reliably. We've got our safety / decocker. Now, something that the gun does, which I'm not a huge fan of, and I know that on a video a while ago, I think Seb mentioned this, is that the decock doesn't lower the hammer very much. Realistically, it should lower it more to that kind of position. It only goes sort of halfway, so. But still, it's very light to actuate. Very quick and easy to do. And then up is the safety position, which I don't really like the feeling of. This is a plastic lever, and it just feels a little bit wobbly. And when you put it on safe, as you can see, the plastic trigger just pulls and kind of bends. It just doesn't feel solid, and you can actually see the safety trying to almost work itself off. So that's something I'm going to get to, lots of things to get to. I don't like the trigger and hammer mechanism of this gun. I don't entirely trust it. I don't think it's very robust. But so far it hasn't broken. It's all worked all right, so maybe it's not a very valid complaint. 1913 Picatinny rail, you've got 4 slots there you can use. That's quite a few for a pistol, so it should fit a wide variety of flashlights and lasers, whatnot. Ambidextrous safety there, like I said, and then we've also got an ambidextrous slide catch. So I know that some early reports of this gun, people were saying that the other side doesn't work. On mine it works 100%. I've never had it not work. No problem there at all. Even pressing it slowly always releases from the other side, so that's not a problem on my example. Right, what else can we talk about? I might go back into the trigger a little bit. It is a plastic trigger, and yeah, I just don't like the feel of it. The trigger pull is, there's no resistance, and then it goes very quickly, and then I think the trigger is meant to stop here, but because it's plastic, it just kind of flexes. It's just got this sort of flexy over travel feel. It just doesn't feel very good. And then the double action is quite notchy, quite heavy. It's not a great trigger, is what I'm getting at here. And the fact that it's plastic really doesn't help. It's just light, spongy. It's not great. But, you know, for airsoft purposes, you know, is that really a complaint? This is mostly going to be sort of a combat skirmish handgun for most people. And at least the fact that it's very light means that you can get off shots pretty quickly. Reset is pretty crisp. So at least it's pretty good for shooting quickly. Talking of the trigger mechanism, whatnot, this is one of those guns where simply inserting a loaded magazine and pulling the trigger will not shoot it. Cocking the hammer will not shoot it. It does first have to be racked and then either fired, decocked, fired, or safety on, or whatever you want to do. Something to note is that the safety can be put on when the gun is completely uncocked. It can be put on when it's at full cock, although like you might have just seen then, it kind of almost looks like it wants to release it. Don't like that. It can also be put on at half cock, and it kills the trigger whichever way you do it. Just pulls back and kind of flexes. Right, so how about disassembly? Slide back, disassembly lever down, and straight off. Now inside you've got a real mixed bag, and it's kind of a shame. The slide components are very solid. As you can see, the metal of the slide is very thick. The blowback unit is solid. You've got these big screws holding the rear sight down. Everything feels substantial in the slide portion. You have to remove that to get the barrel out. Barrel does have that casting imperfection there, but it's mostly pretty good. You've actually got a little spring system, which is I first saw in a TM Detonics, and not enough manufacturers do this. But by having a spring in here, it ensures that the gun doesn't jam up on the chamber, because sometimes the chamber wants to jump up and jam when the slide is out of battery. So that actually prevents that. And you've got your hop up there, which works pretty well. Look down. If I'm thinking right, this actually just has a flat bucking. I thought it might have had a special kind of bucking, but no, it's just normal. So yeah, barrel, pretty standard. Recoil spring, doesn't actually feel too stiff, but it definitely returns the slide with a lot of authority. The extractor is a separate part, as with I think all VFC pistols, which is a nice touch. It actually can sort of move in there. You'll probably notice that when the gun is out of battery, it usually sort of goes in, and then when it's in battery, it kind of pops out, shows the red, which is nice. Nice big loading nozzle cylinder there, which is what gives it the good kick. Now this is something I actually did myself. Previously, underneath this little flappy bit that cocks the hammer, this is something that you see on most VFC pistols. It has a weird little mechanism. It's quite unique to VFC. It'll cock the hammer. What will it do? Yeah, it cocks the hammer and goes sort of... It stays stiff while it cocks the hammer, and then as it rides back over the hammer, it does that, which smoothens out the slide cycle a bit. Because you find some guns, if you rack them very slowly, it'll go over the hammer, cock it, and then as it comes back, it'll kind of get a bit stuck on it. So that gets rid of that. The Glock has the exact same thing, however, it's just inside there. So I think all VFC pistols have that. It's actually quite a good little idea. Anyway, what I was saying is you've got that kind of mock firing pin, which was just a black piece. I just took it apart and polished it up a bit so it looked like a firing pin. Doesn't look great, but it's a bit better than it was. And yeah, that's all we can really talk about with the slide. It's pretty solidly built. Got an FB in there, I don't know what that's about. Oh yeah, another thing. Okay, so the front sight is meant to be held in by a little grub screw in here. Now I was trying to remove the front sight so I could put an aftermarket one on, because I was about to order it, and I thought, let's see if I can get the sights off first. And that grub screw just wouldn't come out. It was completely jammed in there. It was like it was glued in. I ended up having to drill it out to finally remove the dovetail front sight. And then I ended up not buying sights and trying to just refit these. There's actually, I put it in the dovetail, wedged a bit of shim inside it, and then filled the hole with a bit of glue. I made a bit of a mess of it. Not my proudest moment, but it's in there pretty solidly. Yeah, I haven't found the sights to be the easiest thing to change out. You might have noticed there's quite a lot of perhaps like grinding marks around in here. So that's kind of strange. It's almost as if the barrel didn't fit quite right and they just went in there with a Dremel and did it. Anyway, let's get the slide back together and have a look at the frame. Okay, so the internals of the frame are something that concern me. Most of it's all right, so the slide rails are nice and thick. Everything, this kind of side is quite substantial. You've got your dual slide locks there. It all seems quite well built, but the trigger mechanism is just far too fiddly and petite for a gun that's this big. You've got this weird little split sort of lifting sear, and the fact is it's just not very robust. You can feel it when you're pulling this trigger that it feels like it's going to break. So I would honestly recommend that you don't shoot too much double action, because it does not feel good. And I have heard reports of some of these internals breaking. It just doesn't need to be this complicated. There are so many pistols that have so much better, such a better design inside. And I'd say the same probably goes for the decocker. Just try to limit the amount you use it, because this just seems fragile to me. Might be wrong, but it doesn't feel good to me, and that's exasperated. It's made far worse by the the plastic trigger, it all feels like it doesn't really want to release crisply. It all just feels like it's binding. Stick to single action, I would. It's quite crisp. Try not to decock it too much, and you should be alright. Like I said, I've had this a while and I haven't actually run into breakages, but I have read about them, and something about this doesn't feel great to me. So watch out for that. Let's get the gun back together. Okay, so let's have a quick talk about shooting impressions. This video is already longer than I want, so I'll have to wrap up quickly. Now, even on that lower powered gas, which I showed you earlier, the 01 Pro gas, that's less powerful than green gas. This still performs really, really superbly for a metal slide pistol. I used to have quite a worry whenever I'd buy a metal slide gun that it would just be really sluggish and slow, and you know, compared to a plastic pistol, it would just be really lethargic to shoot with that heavy metal slide. And this does have a very heavy, large slide, which is only going to get worse once you put a red dot on it and a silencer and whatnot. But as soon as I shot this, all my fears were thrown out the window. I mean, look at this. I don't know if that translates well into video, but this is a really, really crisp action. And as you can see there, just holding the gun quite loosely, so the recoil is quite substantial. Yeah, really satisfying gun to shoot. It honestly redeems a lot of the things that I don't like about this. I really wasn't too sure when I first had a feel of it. It's not a design that I particularly like. I've never had much of a connection to this gun, but once I started shooting it, it really became my favourite metal gun to shoot. So really good gas capacity and good number of BBs. So this is a good skirmish pistol if you can get around the size. That's one thing I haven't really spoken a whole lot about. I've got pretty small hands and I can manage it alright and get my hands around pretty well. But this is a large pistol. This is a big double stack 45 ACP. Let's compare it to, this is a SIG 229, which is also a very thick pistol, so it's probably not a great comparison. Actually makes it look kind of small. It's a very tall pistol. If I line up the bottom there, especially once we've got this big mag in it. If we line up the bottom of the guns, it's a very tall pistol. It's also pretty long, quite a long sight radius. I suppose it's not all that thick. I mean, this SIG, which is meant to be a compact, is a very chunky pistol. But compared to something like a Glock 17, it feels a lot slimmer, the Glock, compared to this. I mean, have a look at it compared to that little Glock 42, a completely unfair comparison. But, I mean, look at that. How tiny this gun is. Yeah, it's not really a valid comparison though, is it? Now, I often mention in a lot of these that the hop-up's pretty good, but not great compared to a TM or whatever. I think really with some heavier BBs, maybe some .25s and some powerful gas, this would probably give your average TM a pretty good run for its money. It honestly has the gas efficiency and the snappiness of a plastic pistol, of a plastic slide pistol. So really, for someone that's looking for a solid sort of chunky heavy gun, metal, all the tactical features, but they also of course want it to perform pretty well. This is actually quite a good option. I have some reservations about it, like that slightly dodgy feeling trigger. But this is honestly better than I thought it was. And VFC have made some good guns in the past. They've made some not so great guns. But I think that this gun was, I think part of it's maybe why people have avoided it in the past is because of that Cybergun branding. And it is a shame that Cybergun are involved in it. But it's genuinely quite a good pistol. So, yeah. Now, one thing you might be wondering about is the FPS, and I'm not sure. I don't have a chrono, so I can't actually test that myself. It doesn't seem overly powerful compared to my other gas blow-up pistols. It's quite nice to have a powerful feeling gun that doesn't seem to be absurdly powerful in terms of FPS, but it's not something I can actually verify. If we have a look on the box, what do they say? They say 400 and whatever with a .12, and they say 328 with a .2, which sounds about right to me. So So good sort of sight safe velocity. Now I've loaded up a few rounds. I'm going to do a little bit more shooting so you can see the nice snappy action on this. I'm having trouble racking the slide, and I think it's because the chamber is sort of binding a little bit. I haven't actually had that before today. What's going on here? Strange. Yeah, it seemed like the chamber had kind of jammed upwards. Anyway, let's decock it. How am I meant to give you a good view here? It's such a big pistol, it's kind of hard to get on screen. Anyway, let's just do a little bit of shooting over here. Really snappy action, look at that. Okay, and to finish up, I'm just going to do a few shots with the suppressor attached. You can see that it does slow down the cycling somewhat, but it's still pretty enjoyable. Now, something I'm noticing a little bit more and more often, which I think is this kind of dodgy trigger coming into play, is when pulling the trigger quite slowly, it is almost reluctant to let go of the hammer. It almost feels like it's hanging up a little bit, which is not very confidence inspiring. Let's just pull the trigger a little bit quicker. Always locks back reliably. Like I said, it's got good gas efficiency, so you will get all your shots off with that fill of gas. Okay, so in conclusion, it's kind of a tricky one. In some ways, I was really impressed with this. I like the finish, I like the materials. I kind of like the tacticalness of it. I like having it. So that suppressor on there looks pretty good. And I'm continually impressed of the kick and the cycling speed, even with lower powered gas. I mean, this with Garda black gas is great fun to shoot, really enjoyable. And the robustness of the slide means that you shouldn't get any of that cracking that you've seen on any of the other VFC guns. But the more I shoot it, I worry more and more about that hammer mechanism. There's just something not right there about the way this works, especially when pulling that trigger slowly. It feels like it doesn't want to let go of the hammer. Now, I might be alone in this. It might just be my example, but I don't know. I'd be wary of that. If I was going to use this gun very frequently, it'd be something I'd maybe be concerned about. I'd just say stick to single action, try not to decock it, do double action too much, because I don't think that helps. But overall, for the kind of prices that you might be able to get them second hand anyway, pretty good buy. Whether I would have paid the £225 or whatever they were when they were first out, probably not. It's not a gun that still particularly excites me, but it's better than I thought it would be. So there you go. Got more reviews on the way, so stay tuned.